Our guest is in the studio. He is JIMI WANJIGI. JIMI, what are you in Safina party?
Well, let me say I was the Safina presidential aspirant, but I hold no position of leadership in Safina. But I am a member.
You're a member of Safina?
I'm a member of Safina.
Okay. And
I want to just emphasize just what you have talked about, the tragedy at Hillside and Darasha. These are our children, young children that tragically passed away, and we hear some are missing. There's also the young Gen Zs that also passed away. We don't know the exact number, between 61 and 300. I think we owe them a minute silence. If we can do that, please.
Indeed. Indeed. Just a moment of silence in memory of all those that have died. May their souls rest in peace. Siti, give us the day's proverb. So you said this week you are giving us proverbs from...
This of the final. We've been looking at countries. Remember we started off with island nations of Africa. Then we looked at landlocked. Now we're looking at nations in Africa that border the ocean.
And you said how many are there in Africa?
There are 38.
Excluding the islands?
Just the ones that border.
Okay. The ones that are on mainland Africa bordering the ocean.
Yes. So today we're looking at the Federal Republic of Somalia. Yes. A country with a very, very rich history. You wouldn't know that until a coup was enacted and things went belly up, that country was moving ahead very swiftly and very well. To signify that, they even had a Supreme Court.
Yes, they did.
And when Said Barre was a Major General, Said Barre took over, one of the things he disbanded was Parliament, Supreme Court. Constitution.
Vunja yote.
Yes. He didn't know. It caught up with him. Not.
He did.
Yeah, he did. He didn't know. It caught up with him. And the interesting thing about Somalia is that the government of Said Barre tinkered with scientific socialism, tinkered with Marxism, tinkered with many things. But the net result of what they did was they just became more and more and more and more repressive. So at some point, the citizenry said, you know, Nani, you. And that country is only now beginning to recover after very many
What
decades.
did the colonialists call it?
Well, the colonialists, before the colonialists, let's talk about before Christ. It was called Punt.
Punt.
Then it was British Somaliland. Then it was Italian Somaliland.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Very good. You know your history, City.
Reading is good. One does not tell a man, go away, but shows one something he must do.
One does not tell a man, go away, but shows one something he must do. What do you think the Somalis are saying, Jimmy?
That's a very good question. That's a very good proverb. You don't have to speak. You can show one your back and you're saying a lot.
Yep.
Don't have to speak.
Actually, when you put it that way, you're actually right, because you don't tell him to go away, you just tell him, don't speak.
No, at least not to me.
No, yes. I'm sure the other people you can speak about me. Yes. You've been told.
Me,
Now that you've been told.
Yeah.
As you say correctly, kwenda u?
Kwenda huko.
Sweetie. It's good to be back, guys.
Good to have you back.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Good to have you back. And good to see that your place is still
Yeah.
untraceable and unreachable.
You know, these people seem to have perfected bad manners. Very bad manners. And, it must come to an end. You can't keep trying to do the same thing over and over again. The results don't change. Yeah. Leave me alone in my home. Literally, leave me alone. If you want me, come for me, ask me to show up. I'll show up. Don't try and bombard my home, where my children are, where my wife is, and cause such brutality. You are cowards. Men, when they find the essence of even principles of war was that men do not fight women and children because you are inviting the same to your own homestead. Men fight out there. What is our fight with this government? It's just politics. It's just siasa. We have a difference of opinion about how this country should be run.
Why should
we have our democratic right to do it. Why should it be a war?
But why must just a difference of opinion? Why must it that when we differ, as Eric is asking, all we're saying is I think this and you're saying you think that. Why must that constitute a battle?
I fully agree with you. It means that we must be speaking the truth. It means that the people we are talking about have no solution. And they cannot take the pressure that is unto them. Because it is leading to the unpopularity and their demise. And the only way you fight back is to come with some form of dominance of guns. These are people who got in with the ballot. And when you get in with a ballot, you cannot rule with a bullet. You look at our neighbors, some of them, like Uganda. He came in with a bullet. Maybe he is allowed to rule with a bullet. But in Kenya here, you're not going to rule with a bullet.
It's interesting that you say that, Jimmy, because one has to ask the question, then, why you? Or are there things that you have been saying from what that has made or that has created a situation of uncomfortability that they feel that government or state actors now feel as though they must come for you? Why you? What is it that you've been saying? What are you doing, Jimmy?
I think the biggest fear is that we are changing the way politics is done in this country. What I like to call the center of gravity of our politics is fundamentally changing. And we have been speaking it for the last 2 to 3 years. And many people are not hearing. Many people are wondering what you're talking about. The people who are currently in so-called power thought they could ignore it until Gen Z came out. And Gen Z came out, and you could hear their issue. It was the economy. You could hear their issue. It was about ideological governance. And it was said over and over. And there was a sudden realization that just maybe there is another conversation where majority are. A big majority of Kenyans are there. It is not the traditional politics of my community, my sijui, my 10 friends, who are enjoying some cake, my coming to the table with the different wagogo from different regions. The politics that the Mzungu brought here long time ago, that has been perfected regime after regime, even after independence. That is going away. We have become united today on one very basic thing, the pain we each feel about the economy of this country. Each of us are wearing a shoe, we know where the toe is pinching. We know. Each and every one of us. And I'm telling you, maybe apart from Ruto's 10 friends, there's no Kenyan who is not feeling some sort of pain. That is uniting us, and we are starting to ask the hard questions.
Jimmy,
what is wrong?
It's interesting, because if you listened to what the president campaigned on and his messaging, whatever the Gen Z were saying was like a welcome extension to what he was saying, because arguably the president actually ran a campaign on issues to a large degree, signed charters, issues. You're saying this is what we want to do, this is what we ought to do. And part of the reason why he even got the support, there are many who felt it was a departure from our old politics. Now the Gen Z came and said, actually, there's this little detail, there's something called a constitution, and there's this thing that you're bringing, but for now, our point of contest is this finance bill, for now, okay, and spoke about it. As I said, if what was campaigned on was meant, then the idea of thought leadership would have been embraced and have said, okay, we have a movement before us that tells us we must change. We've gotten the warning. It is clear. This message doesn't get clearer. But the moment Raila Odinga's people joined government, we didn't just go back to factory settings. We went back to factory settings in a rush. It's like we never moved. But the thing about thought leadership, it doesn't go anywhere. Not really. The idea is a seed. It's been sown. There is nothing you're going to do about it. Ignoring it is the best you can do, but at your own peril, really, because those ideas have a tendency of growing. And especially if they represent something that the smallest denominator of a Kenyan understands and says, actually, I have a problem. It wasn't always the case. The question that I ask myself over and over and over again, Jimmy, you have spent a lot of time with the politicians. What is it that our political leadership, not politicians, political leadership, what is that they don't understand about ensuring that the economy grows and that we have a huge economy? Do they not see the benefits even to themselves of a huge economy?
CT, that's a fantastic question. And with it, because we started on this show, primarily talking about civic education, I want us to go backwards. Because Ruto is just but a symptom of something that started here in 1887. When a company called Royal East Africa Company came to Kenya from India.
Royal British.
No,
not IB.
Royal East Africa Company first.
Yes.
And then in 1902, you had IB, Imperial British East
African Company. Yes.
This company came after the so-called Scramble for Africa conference in Bismarck did in what was called Prussia at the time. Now, what was its motive? It came here to extract resources, to exploit the people.
And they didn't pretend about it.
Right? And to dominate. They did not pretend. It was a private company coming here for profit. In 1902, when it changed to Imperial British East Africa,
yes,
Kenya became a protectorate. Correct?
Yes.
And as a protectorate, the British government was sort of saying, we are now coming in. That company, you talk about IBEA, now became the governance of Kenya. So this is a private company here to make profits, right? Who became the civil servants? Those people who are here to extract, exploit, and dominate. Who became the policemen to dominate? They are watchmen who are there to protect the master's property and the master's exploitation and extraction. In 1920, it was formalized in full. That has been the model of Kenya. But remember, even as they were so-called extracting and exploiting, they were always bankrupt. They kept being bailed out. Why does that sound dissimilar to what we are doing today?
And who kept bailing them out?
The British government.
Yes.
And then they tried to bring taxation. All right? And they started with the hard tax and many other taxes. And that model continued in independent Kenya, where today you get to power with your 10 friends and you decide you're going to exploit, you're going to extract, and you're going to dominate. Do when you don't listen, askari wanatumwa kwako. Those are the watchmen. They don't even appreciate that you're the one who pays their salary from your taxes. Your taxes keep getting increased and your debt burden continues. That model has never, ever changed. Never. It's now been 100 years plus since 1920.
So it's not decisive behavior, it's learned behavior.
It's
and if
learned
that's the case,
behavior.
can they, whomever they is, be blamed?
How many people want to be elected to go to government to become rich? Where is this? Who created this model? That you become an MP or a governor or a president to go and get rich. In other countries, it's unheard of. To the same colonizers, in their countries, it is unheard of. Because government is supposed to be a place of service. So where did we get this model? It's because government, when it was created, and the model that was adopted from colonialism, was a profit motive. And it always went bankrupt. And it always got bailed out. 100 years, we have now reached the end. We have reached the end, city. And that's what a lot of the political class are not understanding. This model cannot work anymore. It's a total shift now. The days when you are going to keep what you call planned poverty, where 60% are below the poverty level, and 30% are struggling to keep a job, and a few 10% or 10 friends are ruling and earning, are gone. That model is gone.
What's a sign that it's gone?
This is the sign you're now seeing. We are at a situation today where we cannot raise more taxes. I'm glad, City, you talked about reject finance bill. Yes, Gen Z rejected it, but they continued demonstrating, which means the pain was still there even after the rejection. All right? So the pain is still with us. You can't go that way anymore. You have exhausted your loan avenue. You're on your knees, begging the world to save you. Our president has literally become a slave to the conditions in this country that he helped create, and a slave to people he's begging to keep alive. He is currently in political and economic ICU as William Samoei Ruto. That is the state of our nation. We are at an end. We are not producing. And we are saying no more of this. The Adani thing is a case in point. So what happens here with exploitation, extraction, and dominance is that now when you have taken our taxes to pay debt, because you become a slave to debt, what else do you come for? You come for assets, because we need to be bailed out. So a new colonization wave comes. Royal East Africa Company of 1887 is no different to what Adani is trying to do at the airport. You're now coming for our blue chip enterprises and taking them for 30 plus years and colonizing us further. The next it will be Kenya Power. The next it will be our climate. The next it will be our minerals. So we become slaves for another 100 years. That is where we are, because we have nothing. And are we going to agree this? I say no. We cannot continue this. This is the end of it. And the political class don't get it. They don't understand that now we are very interested in civic education. We want to understand. We are now very well aware of what is going on in the world, where we are. It is not like our forefathers who did not even know what reading a book was. We are at a very different stage in our lives, and we are not going to be colonized anymore, whether by our local colonialists, our neo-colonialists from outside. We are cutting off this chain, and they don't get it.
Do we get it, Jimmy, the way you're saying?
Yes. Oh, yes. Look at the amount of civic education now.
Because yes, there's civic education, there's awareness, there's a clamor for change. But do we have a clear definition of what that change is? There are clamors for change even throughout that 100 years. even throughout the clamor for independence, was a clamor for change. What was that? What is it that they were looking for? They were looking for self-governance, or so they believed, that having somebody who looks like you, who speaks your language, being your president or your leader, that is self-governance. Was it? Did it liberate the people? We talked about the second liberation of the country. It's about our system, our political party, allowing multi-party elections and plurality in conversations. Did it change?
No.
Were we aware what we exactly were looking for and what was... Because now you say now we have gotten to another point where we want change. Do we know what change we want?
Yes. At each stage, we were cutting off what we believed was our chain. So when we had the clamor for democracy, for self-rule, independence, what was our chain? Colonialism. The white man ruling Kenya. Right? So we cut off that chain.
That's what we saw as a chain.
We saw as the chain. Right? The next part, we said, you mean we removed the chain of the Mzungu to put our own dictator? Right?
Yeah.
We are not going to be a chain to a dictator who tells us how to breathe, how to walk, right? When we can even go to the toilet. No, we are cutting off that chain, and we cut it. Then we thought along the way, hey, maybe this constitution that came in 1961, when people were still thinking about how to enslave us, is the problem. So we went and we cut that chain. Okay? 2010. And we actually produced a very good document. Really?
Yeah.
Doesn't need to even be altered even with one comma as far as I'm concerned. Now, so we can speak. We have political rights. We can go to the ballot. But our problem is still persisting. Our economic problem is still persisting. So what is our current chain? And that's what we've been discussing on this show.
Jimmy, what we see as a chain, what they saw as a chain in the 60s, in the 50s into 60s, what we saw as a chain in the 80s into 90s, what we saw as a chain in the 2000s. Like you just told us, that was actually not the chain.
No, it was part of the chain, but not the entire chain.
Bas.
Now,
So now that we are saying that we are looking at this new chain, is this a big
it's not
chain?
a new chain. It is now the final chain.
How do we know this
It's
is
the economic chain. And the economic chain comes with system. I told you about the system of a company that came here that became a government. That's a political system and an economic system that was embedded for three things: exploitation, extraction, and dominance. And that's what we're going to change. And two, what is our chain today? I've been on this show for the last 2 years talking about a chain of debt, which is extraction, the biggest extraction to our life. The biggest. Once we cut off that chain, I can assure you, and create a different political order that is not about a government that is extracting, exploiting, and dominating. I can assure you, you have freed the Kenyan to go and prosper. And this is where now ideological politics comes in. New plans come in. What is one group and what is another group? All right? What is Jimmy's ideology about a future? Am I a capitalist? Am I a socialist? Am I this? This is now where you start getting debate about ideology. All right? Political systems and economic systems. And this is where we are headed. This is the turning point. This is the turning point that defined all the great nations of the world, even America. The first debate about what you called two thoughts was about those who are anti-federalism and those who are federalists. You had those who were thereafter for slaves and against slaves. All right? And that was the foundation of what you found as the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. You can take that history and carve it anywhere in the world, what is left and right. This is where we are. And the politicians don't understand this, because the model they have used is the same one that was embedded by the Mzungu. The same one that said, okay, you are the Wagogo of the Wajaluo. You are the Wagogo of the Mijikenda. Come to the table. When you come to the table, everyone in your community is supposed to feel they are represented. You can eat. Because you're eating, everybody else must be full. Right? But it's a club. What is this broad-based government that City is talking about? Ruto's using the same old 20th century tactics in the 21st century. Right? You're bringing people to the table thinking you're solving the problem. You're not. You're not. The problem is still persisting. Pain has not gone away. Right? In fact, I pity him if he imagines so. It was on this show, and I said it publicly, and I said it in public fora, that there is a revolution coming. People thought I'm talking, which Kenyans are going to revolt? What are you talking about? I repeat on this show, who told you the revolution is over? The pain is still persisting. The problem is still there. Who told you it is over? Of course not.
You know, Jimmy,
let's take a break, City. Sorry. It's 27 minutes to 9. Our guest this morning is JIMI WANJIGI. He is a member of the Safina party. He was a presidential aspirant then. Maybe you want to be a presidential candidate with the same party next time, in the next election.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, let me put it this way. Party is something that now has to be developed on ideology and feelings. And Kenyans many times define the party of the moment. So who knows? Who knows?
The party of the moment.
Yes.
Anytime, if we're, you see, I'm taking a leaf from Jimmy's book. We're going historical here. The history that we've had in this country is that every time political leadership is faced with truths they do not particularly want to face, they become violent or they become oppressive. And then they do something else that, Eric, you introduced the show, kicking the can down the road, meaning finding someone to blame. Jimmy, when we had the protests, there are those who said it is you, among others, who are behind those protests. Some were even bold in saying that you funded the protests. In fact, I wanted to say, you know, I know Jimmy, so maybe if he's funding the protest, I can also go to him and tell him, Jimmy, I also want to protest.
So fund me. 1 + 1 equals.
Good one.
Now, in the time you have been in the company and you have done business with politicians and political entities, what has been your take when something that could have been discussed suddenly becomes violent?
A spotlight has been shown. Anytime a spotlight is shone on the truth of what is really happening, it is akin to what the Mzungu used to do. When we clamored for self-rule, what happened?
People died.
People died. We don't even know the exact numbers.
No.
Entire communities were detained, taken off their land and detained. Why is it any different? It is no different.
Actually, taking off their land is putting it mildly. Their entire social structure and fabric was completely bastardized.
Yes.
Completely.
Yes.
The Swinnerton plan guaranteed that.
Correct.
Yes.
So how is it different? Our foundation was wrong in most things. We can say we can take home 1 or 2 good things about the colonial era, such as the education system and institutions of governance that we didn't have. Even saying that they drew the map called Kenya. And we are happy to be together with our diversity and our strength and our numbers. But in reality, we inherited a rotten system. It was never about pulling everybody together.
And it was so by design.
It was so by design.
Yes. So the system then, those that were in power then, they could see the winds of change coming.
Yes.
And they could see with this clamor for independence, there's something that these people want.
Yes.
And the net effect of it is overthrowing this system that we have.
Yes.
So let's run ahead of it.
Yes.
And find a way of managing it so that we protect ourselves and our status quo in another way.
Yes.
And they successfully did it.
Yes. I want to add something to that, Eric. is that it's significant that you note that as they were so-called allowing us to have our independence, catalyzed by some of the things that were happening here, like the war in the forest, Mau Mau, what was happening on the world stage? We had gone from World War I, II, to now a new battle for them out there. Remember the scramble for Africa?
Yep.
Was because of the European battle amongst themselves. Right? Now, what was the new battle? There was a new battle with the sudden rise of Russia, China, and communism. And two ideologies were coming into play, capitalism and communism. And the view, I can tell you, to our great so-called Europeans, was that if they do not let go of our great continent, we are going to be liberalized. Our freedom will come from the communist part of the world.
Yep.
They will arm us. They will make sure that we get our independence through them and adopt communism.
And so they
were
managed.
getting ahead of even communism's growth. It had nothing to do with feeling that we are okay. And if you note on the continent, a lot of the countries that sort of started leaning towards them, that was the advent of major assassinations of presidents. City.
Or political leadership that had stood
Political
out.
leadership that stood out. It was not about Pan-Africanism.
No.
I think that was only in part. The main thing was that they had
So the East-West
communist
divide.
East leaning. And there are very many documented historical books that talk about the CIA specifically hitting leaders.
Okay.
If you look at now multipartyism, and I want you to just note the dates, the clamor for sub-Saharan Africa specifically to get into multipartyism, in as much as we clamored for it here, it coincided with a very interesting historical point in the history of Western Europe and Eastern Europe. It was the end of communism. So when the Berlin Wall was coming down, right? Russia was changing, right?
Yep.
So-called one superpower was emerging.
Yeah.
And the greatest thing with that is that you say, okay, now that threat has gone. We now need time to rebuild our economy, right? And the problem is that we now have a lot of enlightened leadership in Africa who've understood us, who know us, who know where we are going,
Yep.
right? Now we need to send them into a different arena, which is,
Let them fight among themselves.
yes, divide and rule. Okay? So they don't focus on what we're doing, all right?
Yep.
As we don't focus on what we're doing, we grow, right? So they grow exponentially, right? What comes the next phase? Where are we now?
But Jimmy, there's a
What's happening now? No, let him tell us. So where are we now globally?
What's happening now?
What's happening now globally?
So as they grew, what did they send as their chain to us?
Debt.
Right? They grew financially. This is where World Bank, IMF, the printing of the dollar grew. The Western world, right? At our expense, at our exploitation, grew exponentially, especially in the finance world. And then they come back and they start talking about one reform after another, right? Creating situations where we cannot compete. Structural adjustment they started with, then globalization, then sijui nini, right? And as we are on our knees limping, right? Limping, they come and you offer you bailouts.
Yep.
Bailouts.
And aid.
Bailouts and aid.
And cloud of mines.
Yes. No. Now that comes now is the new colonization. Now we want to change our energy source of that potential. New colonization. Because it's not only climate, it is also minerals. Because you need battery life.
Yep.
It's minerals. New wave. The other thing we have, exploitation, is people. We have a young generation up until the year and the next 100 years. The young population is where? With us.
Yep.
You need them as
The
workers.
youngest continent on the planet.
Yes. It's a new wave. And unfortunately, just like those periods, we had our slave traders.
The local
We had our home guards.
Yeah, it was not possible to have it without local
You have-
representation.
You have come to my point, Jimmy, that throughout there's the overall owner of the system who can see the change,
Yes.
and they appreciate the change,
Yes.
and they run ahead of the change.
Yes.
And then there's a local player who is also in a way seeing the change and taking advantage of seeing where to position themselves.
Correct.
Now, the current leaders are your friends, all of them. Ruto, Uhuru, Raila, Kalonzo, they're all your friends. You
Yes.
have sat, you have had conversations, you have dealt together. Many. If you're seeing it, I put it to you, they have also seen it.
I don't think so.
I put it to you that they have also seen it.
I don't think so. I believe...
And not just them, but the system is preparing itself for the next. Which is why I come back to that question I asked you, are we sure of the clamor of the chain that we are going after, whether it's actually the chain that's going to give us the freedom, or are we going to be managed again into our so-called freedom?
Do you know, there are many people, even as the clamor for our independence came up, they'll tell you there were a lot of people who used to argue that the African is not ready to rule himself. All right? And I want to tell you, even today, those friends you're talking about, they do not see it as clearly as we're discussing here. They have been inculcated in a very different system.
Jimmy, what do they see?
What do they see?
Yes.
The politics of the 20th century.
But are we not looking at
I'm a Mugogo, okay, right, with my flock that is sitting at the table. Are you not seeing it?
But don't.
We even have leaders who are going around the country talking about their own communities.
Jimmy, is it not
All right?
the same situation?
And saying, what has changed?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There really is no change.
Yes,
Because
they don't see it.
If we
Eric,
look
I
at what
disagree with you.
happened many years ago,
Yeah.
when we talk about the exploitation and the extraction, there was not just extraction of resources, there was extraction of people.
Exploitation of people. Yes.
This did not happen without the local people making it possible. There
Yes.
were local individuals who made sure or made it possible for this extraction to happen. You don't just
Yes.
come in and take over like that. There's somebody who gives you, somebody who makes a way for you on the local side. So if we're saying that the same thing is replicating itself in 2024, where there are nations around the world for who this extraction continues, today in the name of debt, today in the name of, aid, and the neo-colonialization that we're talking about, then I put it to you that there are still local people who are allowing that to happen. They can see exactly what is going on. They know what is happening. But the personal benefit that was there 60 years ago still remains a source of motivation today. So in as much as they know what is going on, the personal benefits that they get far outweighs any other kind of attention that they're going to pay to millions of people in a population. That the millions of people whose families went and became slaves across the pond, today it's a different kind of slavery. But it still is that there are local individuals who are making it possible. They are in the minority, but they have the power, and so they continue to do it.
I agree. That's why I'm agreeing with you and I disagree with Eric. You see, they do not see it. And if they do, and I don't think they do, they are very happy with the status quo.
But that's what makes it worse for me.
They are not change agents.
That's what makes it worse for me.
That's why I'm saying that the center of gravity of our politics has changed.
But that's what
and
makes
if you want to understand it, Gen Z.
I get it, but this is why I'm saying that it makes it worse, Jimmy, is because, and I keep saying that, you know something, you are aware of it, that's bad enough. But being aware of it and still continuing to do it, for me, makes it worse. That you are very aware of the detriment. You think the people who were passing off families of people in the slave trade in the 1800s, 1900s, you think they didn't know how bad it was?
They knew.
Did. But the personal gain far outweighed any other kind of, shame that they would have felt.
Always.
It's the same thing today. That there are people who know that Kenya continues to be in the shackles of debt. They know that the corruption is bad, but they also know that they will not get caught because nobody's going to put them to task. For me, that makes it worse. That you are very aware how detrimental this is to the people of Kenya. You are aware, but you still continue to do it because the personal gain far outweighs any kind of shame that you will feel.
Correct.
And you've been allowed to get away with it. So they are aware. It's so much more worse.
So you're in agreement with me?
I agree that they know what's happening. They know how bad it is.
Yes.
But they still continue to do it. For me, that's why you should go to the gallows. You know. And you still continue to do it.
Now you brought in a new thing, which is they should not get away with it.
No.
Right. So, again, fundamentally, there's history to that. We allowed the colonialists to get away with it. When we got independence, we allowed the home guards, who you're talking about, because those are similar to the home guards, to get away with it. In fact, they became administrators.
Yep.
In
You
new
put
government.
them in government.
We put them in government.
Yes.
Right? Every single turn. Today, you have impunity in our faces. You have an IG and a police force that has decided the law and courts are irrelevant. They are perpetuating anarchy as though they have a monopoly of it. All right? They are told to appear in court. They don't appear. They are told to produce people. They don't produce them. And they get away with it. And tomorrow's a new day. So listen, it is something in us. And when you start saying you want people to be held for account, you're told, when you move to your revenge, the country is more important to go forward than backwards. You're given all sorts of reasons as to why. So we are our own worst enemy. We have allowed it, right? And I think in principle, when Jomo Kenyatta took power, he said we forgive, but we should not forget what has happened to us. Somewhere, that sentence has been abused for the last 60 years. It has been abused. We forgive, but we do not forget. We not only have forgotten, we have forgiven, and we have just moved on.
Have we?
We have tried to move on, and it is now eating us.
Again, have we even tried to move on? You see, we talk of imperialism because that's what it was. European, not British, European. And if you look at the companies that came here, part of the reason why, whether they went to India here, they had access to a lot of power. Their government supported them. Now, individuals may have grown rich, but so did the country.
Yes.
Fundamental difference. The leadership that we have gets richer, the country gets poorer.
You see, we adopted, that's why I go historically, the Mzungu method here, the colonizer's method. He came here to extract, exploit, and dominate. He didn't come here to make the African rich.
No.
No.
They still don't.
It was so that they become rich.
Yep.
And they meaning all of them, not just the leadership. That is still there today.
Yes.
There is a fundamental belief. And, I hope I am challenged that the so-called previous colonizers believe that they maintain their high standard of living at our
expense.
Our expense.
Yes.
So the colonizer never left.
Never left. He's still here.
But
And we still have the chain. And he still has the traders, the home guards,
the facilitators,
the vanguards.
so we're in agreement, Jimmy.
That what? I'm saying
the system
is half these people, just like the ones who were saying that Kenya is not ready for there's no African that can rule. You know, some of those people who were saying that literally believed it. All right?
Genuinely.
Today, genuinely believed it. today we have people that you're talking about are my friends, right? Who this conversation to them, it's like, what are they talking about? What are they talking about?
They're in
See,
denial.
this is the way.
Yes,
Jimmy,
they're in denial.
they're in denial.
They'll even tell you,
But
oh,
not that
Kenya's
they're
too
not seeing
small. Kenyans are this. Kenya's a poor country. You know, what do? We just have to be on our knees. No, I'm telling you.
My point, Jimmy,
you'll be very.
They are aware. They are in denial.
Are they?
They are aware that times have changed.
Clinically so.
They are in denial. And they are in denial purposely because they know that accepting means that they disrupt
lose.
themselves and they lose.
Absolutely. But what did we
And that's
see?
why we saw the fraud-based, broad-based, whatever coalition coming together.
That one, I wouldn't argue with you, Eric. Yes.
But what did we see? I mean, look at situations whereby the status quo was going to be disrupted. And you can call me controversial or say whatever you want to say.
Yes.
But when the status quo was disrupted,
Yes.
where they would call particular leaders on the African continent strong men,
Yes.
they would get rid of them, Gaddafi being one of them.
Yes.
That they said, you know, you can actually promote, you can actually create, you can actually develop your own wealth. And it was anathema to the people who said, no, we can't have this kind of thinking on the African continent.
Yes.
So we get rid of you.
Yes.
Today we see the same thing still being propagated.
Yes.
That when somebody will stand up and say, no, we cannot have corruption. We cannot have people disappeared. We cannot have children not go to school. We cannot have a health system which does not work. What do? We abduct you.
Yes.
And we try to keep you silent. It is the same manner of
disappear
thinking.
you.
We disappear you.
But you know,
We try to keep you quiet because you cannot be allowed to disrupt the status quo, which allows us to continue to extract.
Yes.
the term disappearing and to disappear people began in Argentina. Now, there's always the thought that this is what happens when something happens over a long period of time. You actually get to believe that it can't change. Actually, it can change because the people who preceded us in this, there's a level of brutality and inhumane treatment of citizens that the Argentinians had that we haven't gotten there. We shouldn't get there. But when you see what we've seen in the not too distant past, it's not that dissimilar.
It's not far away either.
No, it's not far away. Many of them believed this. Some died. They thought they had gotten away. People who are young then, you suddenly find it's come to your doorstep. You are now a grandfather. You were here on this date. This is what you did. And this family has been looking for their loved ones and they've never found them. Please come and explain to us. At the most inconvenient time in their lives, this not has happened, is continuing to happen. I think we've reached the hour.
Yeah, let's go to the news.
This is
Jimmy,
a
stay on for
fantastic
the next
conversation.
one. Okay? Stay on for the next one because we're saying this is civil education, civic awareness. And so we can see if we are ready for the next phase and to finally liberate our country.
Yes.
Okay? And then you'll tell us how your thinking is different from your friends' thinking. Yours.
Gladly.
Okay.
This insistence on friends.
Gladly.
But those are his buddies.
Yeah, his buddies, man. All of them. Kenya's biggest conversation. Keep it here for more.
This is the Situation Room, the only way